Well, greetings and salutations, folks. I hope all is well. Welcome to today's upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Not Only. Those audiobooks, they're available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? So, like I said in yesterday's intro to the first upload of the day, I had spoke to a gentleman for a very brief period of time. I had actually gone down a rabbit hole afterward, lost track of time, and well, I wanted to share some of the information that he shared with me the previous night, but because of the amount of time that I lost, it was impossible without even getting an hour worth of sleep. So I decided to wait until I spoke to the gentleman again this afternoon, share that information, and then I told you about the rabbit hole that I had gone down. And I had shared a little bit of information in regards to the Nephilim and the Catholic Church hiding certain things and such, which I found completely just amazing and really eye-opening. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share his experience with you guys, and probably Monday share the rabbit hole. Right, so the gentleman that shared this experience with me, we had spoke 2 different days, very briefly the first time, and the second time was more in depth. His name's Chase. We're not going to get too much into who he is, what he does, because that to him is not important. It is, but it isn't, because he wants to kind of remain anonymous, and I can't blame him. Happened in September of 2003. Now, there's a mountain range in New Hampshire, about 4 hours east of my house, and I have gone there a couple different times. My parents were big into hiking when I was little, and actually my mom climbed Mount Marcy when she was pregnant with me, so which is the highest of the high peaks in the Adirondacks. But this presidential mountain range consists of Mount Webster, Mount Jackson, Mount Pierce, Eisenhower, Mount Franklin, Mount Monroe, Mount Washington, Mount Clay, Mount Jefferson, Mount Sam Adams, Mount Quincy Adams, and Mount Madison. Now, here's the thing. We can't get Sam Adams and Quincy Adams confused with Adams. The mountain range that we're going to be talking about is Washington, Jefferson, and Adams. They go almost in a kind of a semi-circle, I guess you'd say. And it kind of just like that. Not a very large semicircle, but enough. So 2003, and he was going to go to this area. He had already planned it. What he was going to do was he was going to start at Mount Washington. He was going to camp there for a couple of days. He was going to hike the mountain. He was going to get to the summit, then the base on the opposite side, camp, then hike to Mount Jefferson, which would have been another day and a half hike. Camp at the base, go to the summit, same thing, boom, 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 until he reached Mount Adams. Now, Mount Adams, I've hiked that mountain with my dad, and I found it kind of strange because I didn't know much about it when I was younger. So he and I are talking, and he said, "Have you ever looked into Mount Adams?" And I said, "No, not really." And he said, "Well, I think if you do, you will realize that there is a lot more going on in this kind of mountain range. And a lot of people would think that this mountain range was named the Presidential Range because New Hampshire, the live free or die state, it's kind of notable for the Revolutionary War. A lot of stuff happened in New Hampshire." And he said, "But that's not the full reason." And I kind of said, "Okay, well, let me check out Mount Adams on my own real quick." And I did while he was talking about a couple things. And the second I understood where Mount Adams, or the superstition of this mountain range stems from. Now, within New Hampshire's presidential range, Mount Adams has earned the nickname the Stargate due to the extraordinary concentration of UFO sightings and unexplained aerial phenomena reported in the vicinity. Since the 50s, witnesses have documented structured crafts, light formations that move with intelligent purpose, and objects that appear to emerge from or disappear into the mountain itself. What makes these sightings particularly compelling is their frequently multiple witness of nature, often including experienced military and commercial pilots. The area also exhibits unusual electromagnetic properties, with researchers documenting equipment failure and unexplained radiation spikes at specific locations on or around the mountain. Local indigenous Abenaki legend describes the mountain as a sky portal where spirit beings traveled between worlds. Adding to the mountain's strangeness is the documented concentration of unexplained animal disappearances in the region, where tracking dogs follow trails that mysteriously end as if the animal vanished mid-stride. Skeptics attribute many sightings to military aircraft from nearby bases or atmospheric effects. The historical consistency of reports predating modern aviation and their specific characteristics continue to defy conventional explanation. So, that is Mount Adams, the kind of lore behind it. The Abenaki call it the sky portal. Now, here's something that kind of struck me as odd. My dad, many of you know who've been with the channel, was in the Brownwater Navy during Vietnam. He had seen a lot of crazy stuff during the war, be it human or paranormal. Now, after the war, he ended up retiring from the Department of the Navy. After the war, he was stationed at different bases around the world. And at one point, he was stationed at a base in Germany. Now, when they were stationed there, he was military police and had been watching or stationed at they were stationed to watch this hangar. During this kind of routine that they had, my dad and his buddy that he was friends with in the service, his friend was just an absolutely huge guy. He was a scaredy cat. My dad's 5'9", like 130, back in his healthy days. This guy was like 6'3", 220, 230, just a really big guy, really super nice guy. Just really not afraid of much except the spiritual / paranormal. Big black guy, and he was from the South. Now, during this night that they are watching or guarding this hangar, they see this green kind of glowing lights. My dad's buddy, who his nickname was Wolf, and I know some people are going to be like, whoa, because of the cryptids, because of this. No, it was because he was Cherokee and black. I think that nickname in the cryptid community, you know about 16 different wolves on Facebook that, I like Dogman, call me Wolf. Anyway, that was his nickname. But it was because he was Cherokee and he was of African descent. And it was his nickname since he was a kid. So, huge dude. My dad and him got in a couple bar fights. So, I mean, he was not afraid of people. And this night, this strange glow comes and he starts freaking out. My dad's like, we got to go look. And he's like, we can't go look, Jim. We can't look, And my dad's like, we have to. And he's like, Jim, I don't want to go in there. And my dad's kind of, razzing him. And so they do. And when they go in there, there is no more glowing green light. They open the door and they walk in, expecting to see some sort of something glowing. And there's nothing. There's nothing in there. They were guarding an empty hangar. All right. So why? My dad doesn't know. Just strange, right? So my dad and I had gone to Mount Adams when I was a teenager and hiked it together. I never really thought too much about that. And I wondered if it was because of its spiritual or supernatural kind of lore to it. Makes a lot of sense to me, being that I always thought my dad was kind of a dick when I was growing up. I love the guy, he's great guy, great dad, but just hard worker, retired from the Navy, then went into a paper mill because he was young, and retired. But I never anticipated him being interested in the paranormal, and come to find out after I start my channel and stuff, he is very interested in the paranormal and supernatural. So I wonder if that's it. I wonder if that's the reason why we went, because we had gone there a couple different times. Didn't see anything. Nothing happened. It actually kind of sucked because I was with my dad and I was a teenager and all I wanted to do was hang out with my friends. But, you know, I wonder if my dad expected to see something. But anyway, Chase starts this trip and he goes, I should have known that this trip was gonna be a shit show from the very start. He said, because I got to this area called Martin's Location. He said, and both of my back tires blew at the same time. All right, so I apologize for hitting pause quick. The channel's mascot, Tigger, wanted to get let out. Now, like I said, he, right from the very start, should have known. He said, I should have known that this trip was doomed. He goes, when both of my back tires blew as I'm pulling into this small, unincorporated area called Martin's Location. He's like, I had a spare, a full-size spare. He said, I've never had any incident with my tires on my truck. He's like, it was a fairly newer truck, newer tires, but he ended up getting the other one fixed, changed one, got the other fixed. And he had this all planned out to what he was going to do. He was going to hike these three mountains. So he was going to camp at the base of Mount Washington and for a day. So he's going to have to hike in, camp, boom, get rested, hike to the summit, and then hike down to the base. And camp, hike to Jefferson, rest, camp, Jefferson, base. All the way to, like I said, Mount Adams. Now, he gets to Mount Washington, and without a hitch, the day goes smooth, night goes smooth. He plans on starting bright and early the next morning. What happens is somehow, randomly, he sleeps in. He slept until like noon. Which, if you've ever gone camping and hiking, that's kind of rare. I've been camping, hiking multiple times, Boy Scouts, and I've never slept in. Even when I was younger in Boy Scouts or as I would gotten older. It's just, you're camping, you're on an adventure, you're freaking ready. And he's like, that's the second thing. He's like, so now I've got to, stay an extra day. He goes, and kind of like, which was not planned. He had everything planned to the day. He had this whole kind of kit and caboodle set. Now he gets into Washington and he starts the next day. He doesn't sleep in and he starts bright and early. He starts to realize that there was a couple of times that he'd be on a trail and randomly the trail would just stop, or better wording, disappear for a moment, and almost like he's like, where am I going? Turn around, turn back around, and then there's the trail. Like, he thought he was lost. He has this mapped out. Like, he's got it all set. He's not a novice, or he's not new to hiking, new to any of this. So he didn't put two and two together until it happened like a second time. And it happened a second time when he was going back down from the summit of Washington. And he was, on this trail, and he's just walking, listening to nature. He did say that, at that point in time, there was no silence. It was just like, all of a sudden the trail's there, and then it's not. And then I think I'm lost, and I'm looking around for the trail, and then boop, there it is again. So he gets down to the base and camps out, and he hikes. The next day he hikes, which is a quite the distance, to Jefferson. It's a couple miles, actually. It's not that far, but it's not that great, especially once you've already hiked one mountain. You've already climbed a mountain, you're down at the bottom, you gotta hike more, climb another one. So he gets to the base, camps, and he starts to feel what he thought were earthquakes or tremors. And it occurred the night of him being at Mount Jefferson. He gets really freaked out, like, what the hell is going on? Unaware of anything that's, everything's just like, what the hell? Like, this is really freaky. I wonder if there is an earthquake, because it felt just like tremors. But they were, I mean, many of you have felt an earthquake. In upstate New York, we have them quite often. Unless you wouldn't even know it unless you're looking at, I think they're called a seismograph. But for some reason up here we have them, and they're not very big, but they're big enough to where you can feel them sometimes, and sometimes you don't. But these were an actual, like, tremor, half an hour later tremor, hour later tremor, and he's like, earthquakes don't feel like that. He's like, this is, hikes up Jefferson, goes in, no issues, gets down to the base of Jefferson and camps. So Jefferson goes off without a hitch. And he is still feeling those tremors at the base of Jefferson on the opposite side, so where he's camping to hike to Mount Adams, the Stargate or the Sky Portal. And he proceeds the next day he proceeds his hike, and at one point he gets completely turned around. He's on the trail, he's hiking, he can see the mountain, he can see everything ahead of him, and he doesn't turn around, he doesn't do anything, the trail doesn't veer anywhere. He ends up back at the base where he started off at Jefferson. Almost half a day, not half a day, but a couple of hours out of his day wasted. So now he's got to figure out and turn back around, because he's like, wait a second, this is weird. And he's like, he starts to think at this point, he's like, all right, all of this stuff is just going badly. My truck, loss of losing these trails, these tremors. He started to lose some time, and so he gets to Mount Adams, and he's camping there, and he's like, all right, he's like, I'm a couple of days, even though all of this shit has happened, he's a day or two ahead. And he says, I'm going to take an entire day and rest and just hang out and enjoy just enjoy this kind of peaceful moment, you know. And he's midday, he's sitting there. He hasn't felt any tremors. He has had nothing strange happen. He hears a helicopter. He hears just this tremendous thunder of a helicopter. And he's like, whoa, that's loud. Knowing that there are military bases around the area, he's like, all right, you know, maybe it's just traveling wherever. He's kind of relaxing. He looks and he sees the helicopter. You know, you can hear them. Obviously, you know what I'm talking about. You can hear them, but you can't find them in the sky. And then, boom, there it is. So he sees it, and he's looking at it, and he's like, damn. He's like, that's a big freaking helicopter. He's like, And he sees it start going down. Like it's not crashing, it's landing. It looks like it's landing. And it's landing in between Mount Jefferson and Mount Washington. And he's like, what the hell? He's like, that's not right. He's like, that's not right at all. And he takes his binoculars out. He runs over to an area where he has a pretty decent view of it. And if you Google map the area, you can see where he would be to where he could see a fairly decent view. He takes it and he looks and he's like, because he's confused. He's like, maybe someone else, maybe there's other hikers out here. Maybe someone got lost. Who knows? Whatever. And this is like a search and rescue helicopter. He realizes that this helicopter has what looks like the presidential seal on it, which would be Marine 1. And he's looking, and he's only can see some of the side of it. He's trying to get a good view of where he thought he had seen the seal. And all of a sudden, it goes below where he would be able to see, and he can hear it, and then he doesn't hear it. And he's like, huh. He's like, all right, that's weird. That's really weird. So here's the thing. He's confused, and he's like, why would the president's helicopter, Marine 1, land in the middle of this area? And he's like, all right, well, that's crazy. So he camps, gets up, starts up Adams, starts hiking up Mount Adams. And halfway into his hike to the summit, he hears that thunder of a helicopter. This is a complete day later. And he kind of looks, turns, gets to a clearing because he wants to see, you know, what the hell is going on. And if it indeed was the presidential helicopter, Marine 1. He grabs his binoculars out of his pack. He gets his pack off, grabs his binoculars, and boom. The helicopter's up, and as it's elevated, he's got this perfect view because now it's heading southeast. So he's got a side view of it. And sure as shit, there's a presidential seal and the United States, the insignia of the presidential helicopter on the top part of it. And it gone. And he's like, whoa. All right, that was really weird. All right, that's pretty intense. Gets his hike done. But during this time on Adams, I shouldn't have said got his hike done. During that time on Mount Adams, there was almost double the strange phenomena that happened. The loss of trail, the loss of time. There was one point where after he had gotten to the base, he had camped and he was going to hike back to Jefferson. He was not going to hike he wasn't going back the same way. What he was going to do was hike Washington, Jefferson, Adams, and then back to Washington. So not going on any of the mountains, just hiking that way. Interestingly enough, there's a trail called the Phoenix Trail there. There's a bunch of weird names, right? He's in between Jefferson and Adams. And for some reason, he has this weird feeling that he just needs to take a minute and get off the trail. No reason. There was nothing. There was no... It was just intuition. He gets off the side of the trail and he goes into the woods a little bit and kind of takes his pack off and sets up for a second and just sits there. And he's just kind of thinking about how strange everything is. You know, how strange this is all. And he hears this tinking. And he said, it didn't sound like what you caught at Tom Messick, Jeff. And he said, that was definitely a metallic sound, what you caught. He said, this was like a metal, if there were a kind of metal tube or building and people were working on it, or there was construction or something going on, but it was faint. So he's sitting there and he's like, and he realizes that it's not on the trail or going toward the trail, but it's behind him in the woods a little bit. And he leaves his pack there and he starts to walk. And he's following this just faint noise, and he's realizing that it's coming from below the ground. And he's like, holy shit. He's like, there's something under here. Now, he doesn't find anything. He just realizes, and he's like, I gotta get back to my pack. He's like, I want to get out of here. He goes, I don't know what's going on. He's like, but with all the weird shit that's happened, and then seeing that helicopter, even if it might have been, he didn't know at that point, you know. I just need to get out of here. Something's really fucking wrong. He turns and starts walking out to his pack. He's only not very far in, maybe a half a mile from his pack. He hiked in a ways, but half mile, whatever. Where he turned around to get his pack, it started to get dark. Now, not dusk, but it's dark. So, like, hours of time was lost. Not a couple, like 4, 5 hours. He gets to his pack and he's like, all right. He's like, I don't know what the hell just happened. He's like, but I think I need to hike out of here now. He digs his flashlights out. He's got a flashlight. He's got a headlamp. He puts his headlamp in. Now, anybody can tell you, regardless of how scared or how bad something is, the best thing to do is wait. Find a safe spot and wait it out until morning. Hiking at night is not safe. But he felt like he had no other choice. He starts walking, and he's got his headlamp on. He just passes the base of Jefferson. So he's got a ways to go now to get to Washington and then to get out of there. And he's like, all right. He's like, I'm technically he's making decent time. He's ahead of schedule. Even though there's been loss of time. About an hour into his hike out is when there is not a tremor and not anything that he felt the whole ground around him just shake repeatedly and like magnified 10 times harder than what these little tremors that he was feeling this whole time were. And he is terrified. He's like trying to look around. He doesn't hear anything. There's no noise. There's no noise. That means the silence has occurred. He's looking around trying to see and get his surroundings, he's getting his bearings. And because he doesn't know if he had gotten turned around now because of everything that's occurred. That's in his head right now straight. Like, did I get turned around? Am I heading back to Mount Adams? And the ground stopped shaking, and it shook for minutes. Interesting thing, when he got out of there, he wanted to see if there were any earthquakes reported, and there was not. There was no seismic activity reported, but he was feeling it. He's hiking, and he sees these eye shines in the distance, like they are coming towards him. Something is coming toward him. So he sees these eye shines. He immediately goes off the trail just enough. He gets into his pack, and he has his 45 with him. He kept it in his pack, in the top part of his pack, to where if he needed it, he could get to it very quickly. He didn't carry it on him. He wasn't broadcasting. He wasn't looking for any trouble, and he didn't anticipate any trouble. He brought it with him just because. So he pulls out his 45, and he pulls out his flare gun. He leaves his pack, and he goes ahead of his pack a little bit in the woods, kind of circles around. So whatever he sees, these eye shines, he can look at. He said, I don't know what it was. He said, but whatever it was, there was 3 or 4 of them. At this point, I didn't know what it was. There was 3 or 4 of them. He said, my goal, or what I was going to do was I was going to get to this location, and if I could at least see what they were, I would shoot my flare out in front of them and possibly take a shot at them. He said, in all honesty, he said, I thought what I was looking at was a couple Bigfoot. He said, I know people are going to say, Chase, why would you shoot a Bigfoot? He said, I don't know what I'm dealing with. He said, I'm scared. He said, this too much has happened. He said they weren't people. They were moving rapidly. And people don't have orange eyes. He said, so I get to this location where I feel like I can get a decent view of them. He said, the next thing I do, there's people walking by right now. I gotta hit pause, sorry. So I'm going to do my best to stay alive. He said I could see something. He said I could see they were big. He said, and I let that flare go. He said what I did was I shot it at an angle above these things. He said the second that flare went out, he said I knew I messed up. He said because what I saw is what everybody calls Dogman. He said that flare lit up. It went up at an angle, and as it went up, it lit up the whole area. He said, and those things knew exactly where I was. He said, I shot 3 or 4 times. He's like, I'm not sure how many I let off. He said, it wasn't more than 4. He said, I saw it. That flare went up. They turned and looked right at my direction. He said, I'm a pretty decent shot. He said, I'm not a marksman. He said, I'm not going to lie to you. He goes, I'm not some great shot. He said, I'm all right. He said, I just shot. He said, I aimed quick and I let it rip. He said, and the second I saw after those shots, he said they had turned and were coming toward the area. He said, and I had a jump on them. He said, I started to run into the woods deeper. He said, I could hear them coming. He said, they were coming all around me. He said, I'm ahead of them, but they're keeping up and going faster. They're catching up to me. He said, I dropped my flare gun. He said, I thought, he goes, I was fumbling with it to put another cartridge in and shoot again, so I could at least see. He said, I had turned my headlamp off. He said, I'm trying to fumble with that and run. He said, I got it on, but it was the red lamp. And I'm just heaving. My chest is on fire. He said, and I can hear them. He said, they're flanking me. He said, I could hear one behind me and I could hear him on the side of me. He said, and then all of a sudden, I hear what sounded like someone talking. And then I heard a bunch of rounds. And then he goes, what happened next is, he goes, I'm running straight. He goes, and I run right into this guy. Guy's standing there. Boom. I fall, he falls. He gets up quick. He picks me up. He said, he just picked me up and said, stand here. I'm standing right next to him. He said, I'm looking at him. Mind you, I've got my red lamp on, so I can just make out what I'm looking at. He said, U.S. soldier. He said, I saw the flag. He said, I saw the camo. He said, I saw his M4. He said, I'm watching rounds coming out of guns, and I'm hearing noises, like I'm hearing these things hit. What I'm imagining are these Dogmen. He said, a couple minutes later, he said, everything stops. The guy turns me around and pushes me ahead. During that time, as he's turning me around and pushing me ahead, he disarmed me. It was so quick. And it stuck the barrel of his gun in my back and said, go, walk. He said, we're walking. He said, I can hear shit behind me now with him. And I stopped and I said, they're still behind us. And he said, no, they're not. We get to the spot and it's an opening. It's an opening in these woods, somewhere between Washington and Jefferson. Mount Washington, Mount Jefferson. He said, 3 other guys come walking up. One of them's got my pack. He throws my pack at me. He said, my pack knocked me almost over. He said, the guy just heaved it at me. Boom, hit me. He said, put your pack on, let's go. We walked deeper into the woods. He said, they stopped me and they put a freaking, kind of like a ski mask backwards so I can't see. And they're walking me and guiding me. He said, I'm blind, I'm scared. He said, as we're walking, I'm trying to talk, I'm trying to say, I don't know what's going on, please don't hurt me, yada, yada, yada. He said, I've pissed my pants already. I hear a howl. And then I hear another one, and I hear another one. And these guys aren't even walking any faster. He said, I feel a temperature change. I don't hear any of the outside noise anymore. I don't hear the howls. He said, I didn't hear anything different except a temperature change. They took my head, they took that ski mask that was backwards off my head, and I realized that I'm in some sort of tunnel. Like a caved tunnel, like a cave, not metal, rock. And I ask, where am I? What's going on? And they just don't talk, just keep walking. They bring me to a room. 2 guys come in this room. They know my name. They know who I am. They're going through my pack. They're looking at all my shit. They're talking to me like I'm an enemy of the state. Like I'm a terrorist. And they tell me flat out, you picked the wrong time to come hiking. You should have known when you were told, or the public was told, that in 2003, apparently, Mount Clay was going to be name changed to Mount Reagan. Didn't happen. And when it didn't happen, there was an announcement made that some of the area in that, there's like a state park around Mount Washington and in that surrounding area. Some of those trails and some of that area was closed to the public. You didn't heed the warning. You didn't do what you were told. Why'd you do that? Why are you here? Knowing, you knew that you weren't supposed to be here. He's like, I didn't know anything. He's like, I had this hiking trip planned for, half a year. I don't know what's going on. I don't know where I am. I don't know who you are. I don't know what those things were that I saw. He said, I did see what looked like the president's helicopter, and right there, not the guy that was questioning him, but the guy who had sat silently looking at him, not breaking eye contact that whole damn time, stood up and kicked the back of the chair out from underneath him. He fell back, hit his head, got a gouge in the back of his head where he needed stitches. He was questioned. He's assuming doctor. He was brought to a another room where there was what looked to be a medical facility, surgical, like clean, sterile. They sewed his head up, and they pretty much terrorized him to the point where he didn't have to say, or they didn't have to say anything except, "Did you see anything here? Did you see anything here?" And he said, "I didn't see anything here. I want to go home. I don't know who you are. I didn't see anything." He said, "I didn't see anything. I will not talk about what I didn't see." He said, "I already let it go that I saw what looked like the president's helicopter and I got hit for it." He said, "I didn't see it." He said, "I'm not going to say a word." He said, "This is against the law." At that point, they said, "Nope, it's not. You are being held right now as a terrorist." "I'm an American." "Well, we can do what we want. We can do anything to you right now. We just have to say and hold you as a terrorist." 2 days he is held in this damp, like what looked like it didn't look like it belonged. It did, but it didn't. A room made out of the natural rock that's underneath these mountain ranges. And on the second day, he is blindfolded again and he walked inside. He knew and felt and could see. The blindfold that they had put on him, the ski mask turned backwards that they put on him, was not the same one that he had worn. And he could see through the knit, the lights. He could see through the knit that the building or the tunnels that they were walking through were metal at points. Some turned to stone eventually. Some turned and went back to metal. He had been... They walked him to an exit about an hour, he calculates. During that time, the same two guys that had just, terrorized him were telling him and threatening his family. They threatened his mom. They threatened his dad. They knew his mom's name. They knew his dad's name. They knew his sister's name. They knew his sister's kid's name. They knew where the kids went to school. He didn't see anything. Now, at one point, when he's walking, he said it was about 30 minutes in, he said, and there was a temperature change. He said, I could feel the temperatures changing. He said it'd get cold, and it'd get warm, and it'd get real cold again. And then there was a point where it got humid, and it smelled like a zoo. It smelled like animal urine, feces, and hay. He said it smelled like what a horse barn would smell like, but minus the horse shit, and put some other kind of animal shit in there. Something of predatory nature, where it wasn't hay or, whatever these animals were consuming was not a vegetarian diet. He said it was rank. He said, and it was humid. He said, and we didn't go through it. We went there. It was probably on the side of us somewhere, or it was somewhere, but we never got off this path that we were on. And I could hear growling, and I could hear what sounded like dogs fighting and growling. And he said that after that, another 20, 30 minutes, they put a gun to my back again and said, "We are going to monitor you, and you will not talk to anybody about this." And they released him. It was night. He doesn't know how. He got outside and they walked in further, and it was nighttime because he could feel the difference. He could feel the difference when he was outside. He said probably like maybe 10 minutes from the interior to the exterior and then further out. And he was told, all of these threatening things that they would threaten us with. They took the mask off of me and told me to walk 10 to 15 minutes from when my mask was off, and that I would be at my truck. Do not vary. Do stay on that same path. I did, and I was at my truck. He said I got to my truck. He said my pack was in there. My pack was in my truck. My keys were in my truck. He said I got it and I started it up and I drove home. 2 years later, he went back. And he went with 2 other people. Didn't tell them why. Just let's take a day trip. Let's go check out Mount Washington. And he started to observe things. Not point it out to his friends, and he came to a conclusion. And if you look at this mountain range, there is a deep underground facility in this mountain range, in the presidential range. There is, and he came to the conclusion after looking at the maps, after going there, and he's now decided that, he's since moved. He no longer lives in the Northeast, but he never wanted to share his experience. He tried to contact one other person who doesn't talk about cryptids. Does sometimes, but doesn't. Doesn't even have a YouTube channel, I don't think. But reached out to that person. They didn't respond. 2 years later, heard me talking about that person, heard me talking about certain things, deep underground facilities, heard me talking about New Mexico and how big that place is. And that's when he decided to talk about the New Hampshire facility. And in that facility, they have what sounds like to me a breeding program. Clearly sounds like a breeding program to me. But how can they get away with this? Well, who's going to believe him? They'll mark him as crazy, and he'll end up in a psych ward. So, but if you look at the map of the presidential range and you pinpoint all of these presidential mountains, and then you look at the strange names that are around these areas, like the Sphinx Trail, it'll make sense. And I look at the clearings in this area. There are clearings that clearly do not belong, that are just, how is there a clearing there? Why is there such a clearing between when there shouldn't be? On the opposite side, just take a look at the map and you'll see. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. Keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about. It may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions. Never stop searching for the truth. And God bless you all.